Welcome back to another episode of the Prepping for Everything podcast with me, your host, Emily. As most of you know, we've just welcomed our first baby, Rosemary, and with breastfeeding on demand has come a lot of lying around and watching TV. I don't know how the topic came up, but it turns out that Will has never seen the series The Last of Us. You know the one, it was originally a game and then they turned it into a TV series. I think that was last year. It's got the actor Pedro Pascal in it, which is kind of enjoyable to watch in itself. We are now rewatching it together, and although it's about zombies, which can put a lot of people off, I do recommend it because one, it's a great watch, and two, it actually has a lot of good survival tips sprinkled throughout. Or maybe I'm just picking up on that because I see life through these prepping eyes. But I keep noticing the little things like the importance of bartering in a post-collapse, them mentioning not eating from dented or swelling food cans. Episode 3, which is solely dedicated to Prepper Bill. It's amazing. But lastly, I just couldn't stop internally screaming during the first episode for them to take their bug out bags with them. And it got me thinking and was actually the inspiration for today's episode. We are going to cover all things bug out bags or 72-hour kits. What they are, the importance of them, how to make your own on a budget, what the essentials are to include, and so much more. Be sure to stick around for the listener questions at the end because you all asked some really thought-provoking questions which I think will help other people as well. So when you're ready, let's jump right in. So what exactly is a bug out bag? What is bugging out? This really confused me when I got into this whole preparedness world. I kept hearing people referring to this and I had no idea what they were talking about. I'd only ever heard of bugging out when somebody had taken too much drugs and they were like hallucinating. And this is a very different concept. Of course it is. So a bug out bag is essentially a bag that is filled with items that will aid you on your journey to your bug out location or point B when you're evacuating your home due to some kind of disaster or emergency situation or you need to leave in a hurry. It typically has survival goods that will help you get safely from A to B in the worst case scenario. That's probably the best explanation I can give of what it is. You know, if there's a sudden warning of an evacuation, then every second counts and it literally saves lives when all you need to do is grab your bag, alert your family and get in the car. Without having this packed, you could be an extra 30 minutes and still have forgotten half of your items that are needed. I think what confuses a lot of people is that there are so many different words that could be used interchangeably when describing bug out bags. So they're quite often referred to as 72-hour kits or go bags or even get home bags sometimes. And they do all have slightly different meanings. I commonly use the term 72-hour kit as I think that's what best applies to me. You know, I don't think that I'm going to be bugging out, and a lot of people idealize the concept of this. Bug out bags definitely have their purpose, but I think a lot of people talk about bugging out, and we should really consider this as a last resort for most individuals. And it's really important to avoid idealizing the concept because while many people may envision escaping the city to the forest and living happily ever after off the land, the truth is that the general population wouldn't survive long without a specific destination. So when we talk about bug out bags, I am referring to them in a way that is similar to 72-hour kits. You know, it's a means to an end. You are using them to get to your next destination. It's not to live off forever. And these bags, although a lot of the time are created for real big emergencies, I mentioned in the previous episode that I've read stories of women grabbing them when in labour on the way to the hospital. Do you need water filtration tablets and a first aid kit in the hospital? Probably not. But is it beneficial to have a toothbrush and a change of clothes? Absolutely. Also, they're often used in the case where you can't leave your home for whatever reason, like if you're snowed in and can't get to the shops for food, or even if there's been a power cut, you could almost get everything you need from your bag. There are a lot of companies out there selling pre-made bug out bags, and I usually recommend that you stay away from these simply because prepping is personal, and although a lot of these bags contain generic items, you do still want it to be customized and personalized to you depending on your situation, your location, your climate, how many people you are prepping for within this bug out bag. I do always recommend taking some time to construct your own rather than buying these pre-made kits online. And typically these kits are really cheap cheaply made and the items in them aren't going to last, or maybe the bag isn't going to last. And hey, maybe it's because I haven't found that really good brand yet. So if anyone has any recommendations and they want to correct me on this, then send me an email. If you're overwhelmed, these pre-made kits can be a good starting point, and then you can just build upon it from there and really make it your own. I think the mistakes that people make can often be trying to replicate exactly what someone else has, because you know what my favorite phrase is, prepping is personal. Your bag is going to look different to my bag, because if you live somewhere hot with no seasons and no rainfall, why would you pack waterproof trousers? In creating your own, you don't need to spend a lot of money to do this. You can just simply begin by creating this bag and filling up one that you might already have in your home. You don't need to spend a fortune on this, and I can almost guarantee that you have a lot of the items that you need in your home anyway. But if you're going to buy a backpack, I recommend getting one that doesn't make you stand out in a crowd. You want something discreet and inconspicuous so you don't draw unnecessary attention in a situation of civil unrest or looting, for example. You don't want to draw attention to the fact that you might possess a bag filled with valuable items that others might want. The objective here is to blend in rather than stand out. But in saying that, this could be a different story for your kids. You might even want to consider giving them bright coloured backpacks, such as red or yellow, so that you can actually spot them in a crowded place if you were to be separated. I've even read of adults online creating bug-out bags with the likes of Pokemon backpacks for themselves and not the kids, so that they seem unlikely to be any kind of preparedness person to the general population, in turn avoiding being targeted for their survival goods. I guess you got to weigh up the pros and cons, but I'd rather not be kicking around with a Pokemon backpack, but you do you. The priority for me when it comes to any good bag is that it's comfortable and easily portable. In any kind of real emergency or disaster, there might be a need to travel long distances on foot, so you might be carrying this bag for a long time. Which means we are going to probably want something padded that clips around our waists to help take some of the weight off our back and shoulders. You're also going to want to think about its size and weight for what works for you. Will's bag is larger and heavier than mine simply because he's stronger and bigger than me, and he can handle that. We need to ensure that we're capable of carrying our bags in general. I saw a statistic online stating that the average American takes around 3,000 to 4,000 steps per day, which is around 1.5 to 2 miles. It's actually more than I expected, but do you think most of these people could easily walk, say, 10, 15, or even 20 miles with added weight on their back? And yes, I am only referring to able-bodied people here, so don't come after me. But I know a lot of folk also train with their bags on, or if you walk daily, you could even wear a weighted vest or similar to get used to the extra weight when on foot, or wear a baby in the baby carrier. That soon showed me how unfit I'd become throughout pregnancy. But let's get to the good part. What are we including in these bags, and how do we decide what makes the cut? I'm going to break it down into categories here to try and make it simple, but this isn't an extensive list. If you use something daily and find something that's really suitable for you, then add it. If you think that something's not going to be great for your climate or your situation, then take it away. This isn't something that you need to take as set in stone, black and white. It's completely customizable. So the first 4 categories are based on the survival rule of 3s. You know, these are the things that the human body needs to survive no matter the situation. You can survive for 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in a harsh environment, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. The remaining categories cover something like lighting and communications, first aid, hygiene and sanitation, defense, navigation, tools, and just other random bits and bobs. So for air, we might want to think about having a filtration mask, because depending on the situation that unfolds, air filtration might be the only way that you can access safe to breathe oxygen. I don't want to think about being in that sort of situation, but if you ever are, you're going to want a mask for you and every other member of your family. So this can easily get expensive if you're going to be getting good quality air filtration masks. The next category, where we cover shelter and warmth, let's think about how we're going to protect ourselves from the elements, right? You're probably going to want a tent, a compact tent, so that it's easy and small to carry in your bag. A Mylar space blanket, they're amazing as well. They're super small and can really hold your heat in. You might want to have a sleeping bag. If you don't have a bed to sleep in that night, you're going to want to stay warm. Tarpaulin can help for so many things. You can make a shelter out of it. You can use it to keep your bags or your clothes dry. It can be waterproof and rainproof. You might want to think about some hand warmers. They're just lovely when you're freezing and they could come in really handy. Some weatherproof matches and a fire starting kit. Fire's a big one, right? It can be used to signal for help, cook food, purify water, and also obviously keep you warm. That's the main thing. If you're out in the cold, you need to stay warm. You're also going to want a change of clothes for obvious reasons, but let's imagine you get soaked through and it's now cold. It's a recipe for hypothermia. Maybe start with 2 sets of underwear per person. You can get quick dry materials so that it's easy to wash and hang if you're on the move. 2 pairs of wool hiking socks per person. I say wool because the material is known to be breathable and it works well to keep your feet warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Next, it's also good to have a warm base layer. Again, usually wool or fleece works well here. A rain poncho, gloves and hat, maybe a balaclava to protect your face in harsh conditions, and a pair of sturdy hiking shoes or boots. These can be tied to the outside of your bag to save the inside space. Next category is water, one of the most essential items, but it's difficult to carry. It's going to get heavy really quickly, right? And like I said, we need to think about how much we're carrying weight-wise. I've found it's good to have options such as portable water filtration systems, chemical water purification tablets or drops, and not forgetting a collapsible water bag or bladder so that we can actually carry our water and keep it free from contamination. And last up in the big 4, we have food. In a 72-hour kit, we're aiming for 3 days' supply of non-perishable food per family member. This is actually easily achieved by having some freeze-dried foods, which are amazing as they're super lightweight and usually only need some water to reconstitute them. A lot of the time, you can even eat freeze-dried foods without having to reconstitute it. That's where I always go on about my freeze-dried banana chips. They are amazing as a snack, but there's just so many other things that you could use. Other options are MREs, which stand for Meals Ready to Eat. They are go-to meals that soldiers carry. You've probably heard of them before. You can also keep canned goods. The downside of these, obviously, is that they're heavy and they can take up valuable room. Or, let's see, other shelf-stable foods such as high-nutrition protein and energy bars. I guess we could also fire another item or two into this category, which is the likes of collapsible fishing kits or snares so that you could still eat on the move. So those are the main ones, but what are other essential items? So we're wanting to think a sturdy flashlight, maybe even a hand crank one so that you can just keep winding it up. It doesn't need fresh batteries. A headlamp for times that you need to go hands-free. A whistle, just in case you need to signal for help. Walkie-talkies, if you're out as a group, can work really well if the phone lines are down or if your phones aren't charged. A solar charger. We have one of these solar chargers, which are also an emergency radio and a flashlight. It's pretty good, and I think you can get them for all different prices online. If you just search solar emergency radio charger or something. One of the biggest items for me also is your first aid kit and your hygiene and sanitary items. I think that these are so often overlooked and they're actually vital, as a simple cut or graze could easily become infective when you're not in your usual environment, when you're outside, when it's mucky, you're not able to wash your hands a lot. And a lot of what I'm about to say is pretty self-explanatory, but let's quickly cover some of the main things in this category. So alongside a comprehensive first aid kit and the knowledge of how to use it, because that's important, if you think that you're not brushed up on your first aid skills, you could keep like a small portable book in with your kit as well. But you want to think about having painkillers, prescription medication, a spare set of glasses or dentures if you wear them, antibacterial wipes and hand sanitizer in case you can't access a lot of water, toothbrush, a travel towel, feminine hygiene products, don't forget those, medical gloves, moleskin or blister patches. That's a really good one. If you're traveling on foot, something like a simple blister could really slow you down, so it's worth adding these. And lastly, not forgetting a tourniquet, which is a compression device that stops the flow of blood through a vein or artery by compressing a limb tightly. Other random items. We have the likes of a map and compass. I think we're so used to relying on our phone, sat-nav now, Google Maps, Apple Maps, that we forget if this is taken away, an actual physical map could be so important. Cash, another big one. You're wanting to have cash in small bills, as a lot of the time you won't be getting change if the power's out or for several other reasons really. A good multi-tool could go a long way. A notepad and pen for obviously taking notes, but leaving messages if you have to for other people. Paracord and duct tape. These are some of the usual ones that go into all these kits, right? They have so many uses. And lastly, which is a big one in my opinion, is copies of important documents such as passports, a hard copy of family phone numbers and addresses, and a photo of your husband, wife, or kids, or the important people in your life. If you get separated in a crowd, you might want to try and find them by showing other people their photos. That could be really, really important. I thought I'd done a great job of covering the essentials of bag out bags in the beginning part of this podcast, but I asked you on Instagram to leave a question surrounding this topic and we'll see if we can help answer it. And you came up with a lot of great questions. It turns out I'm not as prepared as what I once thought, and I missed a lot of the important questions that you wanted to hear. So if you left one, I just want to say thank you because it really helps me expand my mindset and really hone in on what you want to see. So let's get into them. First up, we have Jemima, and Jemima asks, where should you keep your bug out bag? That is such a simple question, but actually really important. So I recommend you store your bug out bag in a place where you can easily grab it if there's an emergency. You don't want to have it hidden away in an attic, in the back of a wardrobe that you're not going to be able to get to without pushing loads of clothes away. So this might be a designated closet near the front door, a garage, a mudroom, just a location that's easy to remember in a stressful situation. You're wanting to avoid hiding spots that might be forgotten about or inaccessible. Plant Harvest Repeat asks, what is a good place to find a list? So I have a list on my website, preppingforeverything.com, but I'm actually going to send out a bigger comprehensive list of things that we covered within this week's podcast in my newsletter this week. So I'll leave the link for my newsletter below. If you want to sign up, click that and you will get that to you this week. It just saves you trying to write everything down that we discussed in this podcast. Next up, we have Jen, who says, the having to cycle through it overwhelms me. Is there any way around it? I totally understand that, and it can seem overwhelming, but once you have the basics packed within your bags, there's not too much that you need to cycle through. Obviously, we want to update our clothes seasonally, and we want to make sure that our food and water isn't expired. That's the main things really that I can think of. And checking our medications, but seasonally just works really well for us. 4 times a year isn't too hard to stick to, and if you put it in your calendar, there's that nudge for you to be reminded of it, and I think when we just get to it, it's not as big a deal as we make out in our heads. Okay, Emily asks, how many days would you pack a bug out bag for? And Tom asks a similar question of how much time does your bag cover? Would you go for more of an overnighter or 72 hours? So as I mentioned, this is dependent on whether it's a go bag or if you're actually planning on bugging out for a long time. I personally stick to the likes of a 72-hour kit because you can't pack enough food to last you forever. It's more of an in-between insurance to get you to your next step or location. I also think it's an easily achievable goal for most people, having that 3 days worth of everything that's going to keep you going. Kayla, Sabrina, Laura, and probably a lot more people since I last checked Instagram were asking questions that were surrounding kids. What about the kids? What do we do with them? Do they have their own? Do we pack their stuff? What happens if they get separated? So with kids, we've really got to take into consideration what they're like as a child. Do you think that they would be independent and responsible? Would they be empowered by having their own bag? And I would not put everything that a kid needs in a kid's bag, right? Because at the end of the day, they're still children. They still might make mistakes. They still might leave their bag. It might get too heavy for them to carry. So what I usually recommend is with younger kids, if you think that it would suit them, we can still empower them with the likes of like a fanny pack, and within that, give them their own version of a bug out bag. Give them a couple of snacks, maybe a little water sachet, some plasters, a whistle in case they get separated, any addresses which are really important for them. So if another adult finds them, they know who to contact, they know where to go. And I think if you feel like your kid is older and responsible to have their own one, then sure, you can give them a bug out bag. But I definitely recommend mum and dad keep the main things that they need in their bag for children. I hope that makes sense, because kids are kids at the end of the day, and we don't want to put the burden on them of holding everything and carrying everything, and them being severely disappointed if they lost their stuff, which was essential for them to make it through the next few days, you know? And I guess this kind of ties into the next question, where Angie asks, how do you pack for a family with small kids and allergies? So we've already covered the former in that last question, so let's address the allergies situation. I'm unsure what kind of allergies they have, and I'm no doctor, so none of this is medical advice, but just prepare for that as you would for any other day or outing with them. Pack antihistamines, any other medicine or creams, or an EpiPen if you need that. Personalized snacks or foods that they can eat. It's just, we don't need to overcomplicate it. It doesn't need to be a really big deal. Just think about, what do you use, what do you eat, what do your family need on a day-to-day basis, and then try and apply that to your 72-hour kit. Life's a Library asks, do you carry personal items, jewellery, books, etc., or just survival things? So I mainly am focused on keeping the weight down off my kit, because I know that I wouldn't be able to carry a really heavy bag for a long period of time, and food always comes before those sort of things for me. I'm a foodie, I need to eat, you need calories if you're going to be walking a lot. You understand that. But I do keep a pack of playing cards. I like to have that. It's good to kill time. I think everybody loves playing cards. And I also actually keep a small book. It's like a herbal and mushroom book. It's specifically for Scotland, because I'm concerned about if I'm ever in a situation where I need to eat these things, that I'm going to poison myself with a mushroom before I even make it past the third day. So I like to have something to kind of try and identify my surroundings and plants and what I could eat and couldn't eat if there was an emergency situation. I know that mushrooms are not something to be messed with, and even from a book, it's not a great place to learn from. But that is something that I'm going to try and improve this year, because there is like local courses that host foraging classes and helps you identify mushrooms. So that is what I'm going to do this year. I know, not very exciting, but this is what I'm interested in now, and hopefully it will better my knowledge and my understanding of everything. And maybe this time next year I might be able to know what's safe to eat and not in my area. V2 Prepper asks, what are your top 5 items? Probably for me, just the basics: food, water, tent, sleeping bag, and a good multi-tool or a knife. There we go. That was so easy. Quickest question yet. Annie asks, have you updated it with a newborn? I actually got a lot of different variations of this question. A lot of people want to know, and I'm going to tell you that I haven't yet. So the main reason for this is because we do take a nappy bag everywhere, and that essentially has all of her needs in that one place. It's always there, it's always accessible. And I think as she gets older, I'll be adding more things spaced out in between mine and Will's bag, because I don't want to just have it again in case me and Will got separated and he had Rosemary. But right now, I think I'm quite happy having her nappy bag, because anything within her bug out bag, there wouldn't be much of a difference. The only thing maybe would be trying to keep her warmer at night times, but that's all I can think of. And I think we're just going to take one final question here. Sven asks, is there a mistake that you often see surrounding bug out bags? I guess I've touched on the making it too heavy, or not being physically fit enough to carry it, or not updating it for the seasons and keeping on top of everything expired. But another one that comes to my mind straight away is folk not testing their gear or keeping items charged. Like, what's the point in having, you know what they say, in having all the gear but no idea? We need to know how to use all of the items included, like not just in the midst of panic when your head is going to be all over the place and scrambled. And the same goes for your flashlights or your charging ports. What are they called? Battery banks. All of these need to be charged, or what's the point in having them taking up space in your bag? And one other big one is not having a plan in place before or after you leave your home. Where are you going? How are you going to get there? Do you have supplies at that location? Do you have a family preparedness plan for if you're not all together when something bad happens and you can't reach them over the phone? What about your pets? What are you going to do with them? You know, if you have dogs, are you just planning on leaving them in the house, or do you have a way to transport them to your next location? Do you need to have a pet evacuation bag or a go bag? Do you have a vehicle that's big enough to transport all of you? If you have livestock, what are you going to do if there's a wildfire? Do you have, again, a trailer that would take everybody, or do you need to just open your gates and let your animals go? There's a lot of things that come into this. I know here in the Highlands of Scotland, again, we don't really see a lot of that, but someone listening to this could be in the likes of California, where you do get a lot of wildfires and you need to plan for these sort of things. So my one piece of homework that I would leave you with is think about creating a family preparedness plan. This doesn't need to be scary for kids. It's the same as having, a fire drill plan for your house. Have you ever talked about that with your kids? Would you tell them what to do if you couldn't get through the house to them? Do they have a stool that they could push to the window to climb out of? There's so many things that come into play that I think we might go into this next week so that we can really break it down. And yeah, I think we need to get into that more, because that's one of the most important things of all of this, is everybody being in the same boat and knowing what to do in the face of an emergency. So I think we will leave it there. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for sharing this podcast on your social media, sharing it with family and friends, and leaving ratings and reviews, because it really helps other people find this. I appreciate you so much, and I will see you next Wednesday.